right, everybody, welcome to the newest edition of Deals and Deadlines with Hadley and Matt. Thank you so much for dialing us up. If it's your first time finding us, I will remind you, you can subscribe to this podcast wherever it is you get your favorite pods. We are available on every podcast platform with new episodes dropping each and every Friday. Also available to you on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel. We got a lot of ground to cover, but this man is freshly back from Indiana. He was in Indianapolis for the Combine, so let's start right there. Give me the kind of the rundown of how the events played out.
First of all, great weather, and that's always a big factor when you're at the Combine. It's not always great weather, and so it was great weather. Wonderful, several days there. Obviously, it's a great opportunity for all the agents, one, to get our certification, our annual meeting. There's some change and turnover in the NFLPA, so we got to deal with that and hear about the news moving forward. Excited about the new cap number and a great opportunity to obviously network with colleagues in the business, see general managers, personnel directors, coaches. It's really the one time we get to all be under one roof. And it also gives us a time to talk to teams on the record and off the record about clients that are on teams and clients that could become free agents.
And by the way, free agency begins on Monday, so we'll talk about that in a moment. But I did want to ask you, there are so many stories that you have to kind of sift through that what's real and what's not and who's putting out smoke screens. There was a story that a quarterback coach from a team drafting in the top 7.
I love these stories.
I know, these are great.
Like a quarterback coach.
Right.
Go ahead.
Drafting in the top 7 referred to Shedeur Sanders as coming off brash and arrogant. In his interview, that news came from Josina Anderson. Now, again, that could be a smokescreen for somebody who wants him. That could be the real deal that Shedeur has had some people talk about some personality traits. So how much do you pay attention to what you hear, stories like this, and how much do you think it really affects what we're going to see in the draft?
When you say me pay attention, in the business world, we don't pay attention to any of it. Whether it's smokescreen that somebody put it out there, or a team is actually doing it because they are trying to bring his value down because they have an interest in maybe getting him at a certain spot or trading up. So a lot of it is just about a lot of nonsense, a lot of drama out there. At the end of the day, his film speaks for itself. His workouts are going to speak for itself. And teams that are really interested in him are going to bring him in on a 30-person visit to sit down with him at length, go over the board, get to know him personally. Obviously, he's not an unknown commodity. He's Deion's son. I mean, so there is something to be said for that. And is
that helpful or hurtful, or does it matter at all?
First of all, I think it's actually helpful because DNA is in him to win. And he's a winner. And listen, imagine Deion playing with today's social media, right? He was out there when there was no social media. So at the end of the day, Deion did his job and does his job as a coach. So I think Shedeur is going to be fine. I think teams that want him are going to draft him. And I think you can hear this not only with him, but with other players and people not doing well and the media making more of it. It's at the end of the day, teams have spent months and years evaluating these players. They're doing more evaluation and, they'll make a decision based upon a body of work. Yes, the interview is important, but that's just a small part of the entire drafting process.
All right, let's talk about a big deal that's been done now in advance of free agency. The Philadelphia Eagles agreed on a 2-year extension with Saquon Barkley. 2 years, $41 million, 36 of it fully guaranteed. There's still $15 million in incentives live from last year. He becomes the first ever $20 million running back. Is this a one-off? Is this an exception? Or has the market now been reset?
First of all, I'm surprised Howie Roseman, the GM, actually did this
which is interesting because the way people are framing it in Philadelphia, this doesn't feel like a Howie deal. Feels like an ownership. Jeffrey Lurie, let's reward Saquon.
But at the end of the day, listen, let's talk about Philadelphia first. It sets a precedent, good or bad, right? I mean, obviously, if he is rewarded this way, other players of similar skill set, similar accomplishments, different positions maybe, are going to expect the same reward. So it's a touchy-feely situation. As far as the running back market goes, and Saquon is Saquon. I mean, he had an unbelievable season, won a Super Bowl, did everything. For free agent running backs out there or potential free agent running backs out there to use this as a leverage point, of course they are. We do it all the time. Is it going to work? Maybe.
Can we talk about one guy, though?
Yeah.
Because I think Bijan Robinson in Atlanta is one that's still got time.
Correct.
He's still got 2 more years and then a 5th-year option. But I think when you think of skill sets and productivity, and if he stays healthy, I'm going to guess Bijan and his agent were very happy. 2 reasons. A, the salary cap went up. We just set a new market number with Saquon that if Bijan has another good 3 years, like he's one of the guys that I think could look at that number and go, okay, we'll start there.
Yeah, and listen, Cook with the Bills is going to use this. So there are plenty of players out there that are going to use it as a starting point. But again, Bijan and Cook are different players. Teams will value them differently. We're dealing that now with players at different positions, and we go ahead and we compare, players and look at them and say, these are the players we think our client fits with. The team's going to say a lower number, obviously, and then you negotiate from there. So it's only going to help the running back market. It won't hurt it. But will it change it drastically? Only time will tell.
Okay, let's talk about a quarterback. Sam Darnold and the Vikings were discussing their options, whether they were going to tag him or not. They decided not to tag him. The tag would have put it at $40 million for Sam Darnold, which the Vikings thought was a little too steep for them. Now we get into this really murky area that Sam Darnold or Brock Purdy, they're not thought of the way we would think of Josh Allen or the way we'd think of Lamar Jackson. So where do you try to figure out a number if you're the agent and you're the team? Maybe the AAV is a little bit higher, but the years might be a little less. Is that probably where you meet in the middle on guys like that?
Yeah, and remember, we're talking about, when you talk about Purdy and Darnold, 2 different types of players. Purdy was a guy they drafted late, became a star of the team. Is he a product of the system? Don't know. And I think if they want to keep him, there's a way to structure it so Purdy's happy. Again, you talked about it, guaranteed, average per year, how much money in the first couple of years versus spread out and backloaded. Sam Darnold's bounced around, and he proved it last year what kind of player he is. I think he ends up back at Minnesota. I think he ends up doing a deal that works for him. But again, free agency's on his side. Although it begins Monday, the tampering period, free agency officially begins on the 12th, which is next Wednesday. And so I think he's going to use the time frame to his advantage. Again, he's at the point of his career, Sam Darnold, where if he likes Minnesota, wants to be there, family wants to be there, likes the coaching staff, he may massage the numbers that work for Minnesota, but also work for him. Mm-hmm. If he's looking for, and it's a team that's a winning team.
It is. It's also, there's a twist to it that they drafted J.J. McCarthy.
Correct.
So if you're the Vikings, do you want to get into a long-term relationship with Darnold and still try to figure out McCarthy? So there's a couple of
and
obstacles
McCarthy's coming
there.
off of injury,
Right.
and the question is McCarthy, if they decide to go with Darnold because they realize they can win now, is McCarthy still the backup? Because again, it's sort of like what we've talked about in Atlanta.
Yeah.
When you have multiple players and you're budgeting for them, just moving them back and forth doesn't change the overall budget. So I think Sam Darnold's in a great position. He has to make some decisions on what's important to him. And again, we do this. We're dealing with it now with clients of ours that are going through this process, and you have to sit down with them and figure out what are the important factors. Is it money and money only? Is it guaranteed? Is it city? Is it coaching staff? Is it quality of life? All these different factors have to come into play, and Sam Darnold and Brock Purdy, for that matter, will make decisions using all these variables to make a decision that works for them and obviously works for the team as well.
All right, coming up, we'll talk about what the days before free agency are like for the agent, for the player, how tense or intense do things get. Plus, we'll talk about an NIL deal in college football with one of the biggest names out there that's going to make a lot of sense. We'll do that as Deals and Deadlines continues. All right, Deals and Deadlines continues with Hadley Engelhardt. I'm Matt Chernoff. Thanks so much for making us a part of your, afternoon, morning, evening, middle of the night, whenever you're checking it out. Remember, you can get new episodes of Deals.
Or multiple times a day.
That would be even better.
I know.
I like the way you think. You can get this podcast each and every Friday when it drops, or we are available on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel. All right, Hadley, talk to me about the days before free agency is to begin, because nobody can sign until Wednesday, but the legal tampering period begins Monday. We know there are whispers with your types that have been happening at the Combine and other places. So before I even get into that, do you think the NFL fully admits, yeah, we know tampering happens, just don't be overt about it, where we're not going to start checking cell phone records unless you do something dumb that we have to start digging into? How much does that conversation happen that the league's like, we know, but we just don't want you publicizing?
No doubt the league knows it. Every team is doing it. Every team is, they'll even text you about a player they want to talk to you about. So they are creating a paper trail, which is surprising in most cases. But it's the tampering period has begun. We're not talking specific numbers right now, at least we aren't, but just to get an idea of market value. to have an idea so we know that that team is in play or not in play, and vice versa. What do you think the market value is so a team could say, hey, it's too high for us, we need to go in a different place.
But you're not talking numbers, so explain that to me. So like you'll send a text to a team, hey, we've got player A, or they call and say, is player A interested? You don't talk numbers, but like what does that look like?
You talk range.
Okay.
So again, you talk about average per year range. So then it comes down to negotiating, of that average per year, what is it signing bonus? How much is in guaranteed money? What's the length of contract? So there's a lot of things that have to still be worked out, but it's an idea so everyone knows moving forward whether you're going to be in play or not. That talk leads up until through this weekend, leading up to free agency. And then once the tampering period begins, you really go full throttle and have conversations specifically about what teams are interested, what the value is, and you use that 48 hours or so to weed off some of the teams that aren't as interested, and then you focus on the teams that are within your price range, within your structure, within your guaranteed, within your length, all these different factors to hone in on a team. So come Wednesday, if things go perfectly, you already have a deal in place.
So explain that to me then, because I'm fascinated by the logistics of this. We've talked, is it text? Is it if it gets more serious, we're on the phone? Is it we're firing emails? Like, are some teams old school that they want to put a voice so they can hear inflection? Like, how do you like to do your deals?
I love to do it either in person, which is at the combine having stuff, and I love having phone conversations. Most of the deals, once you're structuring the deals, are all phone conversations. All the general stuff could be texting, and even at the end when you're working the deal, you could say, hey, can you add this or add that? But the deals are done via telephone right now, and it's and you ask the question, is it tense? Is it intense? It's all the above, right? There's different phases and different emotions, not only for me, but for the player. And I always have to remember to remind the player to keep us cool, that we're going to get through this. And you're always advising the player because throughout this period, you've had these conversations about what's the important thing.
Right.
One of the other things we work on is there are players that have a high cap number that may get released. Right. So we start preparing for that in case it happens. Okay, if it does happen, or they want us to take a pay cut, what are the important factors? Do you just want to go to the highest bidder, or do you want to go to a certain market, play for a certain coach? I've made all this money so far. Money's secondary. I want to play for a winning team. My wife's from this area. There's so many different factors, and at the end of the day, we have to wear many different hats to help these players navigate. But at the same time, we play this role, and then when it's time to negotiate with the team, we took our hat and put it on backwards. And it's go time.
How much communication are you having with the player? Quite obviously, you're running any offer by him, but I imagine a negotiation can get emotional, right? And not between sometimes the agent and the team, but if the player's hearing, here was the offer, or this has changed, like you want to have as much open communication, but I bet the player, that can be a really nerve-wracking till it's done and something happens in the 11th hour, it doesn't get done.
It is very nerve-wracking for the player. And that's also why we and myself, in doing this a long time, every little conversation I have with the team, I don't necessarily turn to my client and tell that client every single thing I've said. I kind of wait to see if it's moving in one direction or another before I relay it back to my client. But I've also had these conversations with my client leading up to free agency, potentially getting cut. So we kind of already know we're prepared. I spent this morning doing it, and I will do it over the next several days to make sure that we're always on the same page. And again, team interested today may not be interested tomorrow, because another person becomes available or they re-sign a current player. So many different variables come into play. So you have to prepare for all scenarios, and that's what we do.
Will you then, so the offer's made, are you advising the client, hey, here's what I would do, or it's, here's the offer, it's your court, you want to decide, or like where's the conversation with that once the offer's made?
Well, we'll take an unrestricted free agent. So in the best case scenario, there are multiple teams bidding. And if he likes multiple teams because of the scenario, it comes down to money. And we will go through what's important to him. Here's what the team's offering in signing bonus, in guaranteed, in average per year. You'll see these contracts that are 4 and 5, sometimes 6 years, which I wouldn't do, but 4 and 5 years. we look at years 2 and 3 collectively. Anything beyond 3 years is gravy.
Right.
So we really look at what are you making in the first 3 years and don't backload it. A lot of teams love to do that because it looks better on paper. Oh, you're making X million dollars a year. But the reality of it is it's 2 or 3 years. And if it's a long-term deal, it's more likely 3 years. Yeah. So we are constantly having these conversations, and then we hone in on a team and say, all right, this is what it's going to take to get done. And the player already knows this in advance, and the best calls are, hey, you've got to deal with Team X, and congratulations. And then the parties connect, and that player's on a flight taking a physical and signing his new contract.
Have you butted heads with a player ever on, here's what my recommendation is, or he wants to do something different? Has that happened where it's just you don't see an eye on what maybe the best fit or best situation might be?
I wouldn't say butt heads. We may have a disagreement because it's a better opportunity, better money. But a player may say, I'll take less money because I want to play for this coach and stay in this mid-small market. I don't want to go to a New York market, let's say. I don't want to deal with all the hoopla that goes along with that. And so I wouldn't say we ever butt heads because, again, we represent the player. And if you're working with these players, you already know their personality. You already know what they're looking for. You're just trying to present them the best deal, the best opportunity, and putting them in the best situation. And our whole slogan always is, if we can create generational wealth where you're passing it down to your kids, that's the grand slam for us. Sure. But if a player decides, I'll take less money, and we've had that before, to play in a market and a team, we support them, we do the best deal for them, and they're happy, we're happy.
All right, let me ask you one more thing about free agency, and then I want to switch gears and talk about some NIL. When the offers don't come in the way you want early, will you advise the client, let's sit? I mean, because we always hear about waves of free agency, the first wave, the second wave. It's got to be that kind of fine line of we want you to get a deal done, and the money won't dry up, but teams do spend probably a good portion of what they have early. So what's the balancing act on that?
That is always a difficult scenario because you always want to be in that first wave. So it gets done, player stress level goes down, and they're happy. There are a lot of situations where a player's deal doesn't happen as fast as you want, and there are waves. And if you're valuable, again, teams spend a lot of money early, but then they realize we still have a gaping hole at a position, and oh, look, Matt Chernoff is still available, let's reach out to him, and all of a sudden, it becomes a valuable commodity. And so sometimes you're better off waiting. And again, if there's a player that is a veteran and is just looking to continue his career, you really want to wait, because you want to be in a situation where you're going to make that team, where the contract is solid. Sometimes you wait till after the draft even, and there's a new market for it. So there's never a set thing, when it comes to, when it is. First wave is always the best wave, but doesn't mean second, third, or fourth wave isn't a great wave either.
Well, there's a post-June 1 opportunity for a lot of guys. Okay, when we continue, we'll talk about a couple of NIL deals, one involving one of the more famous names in football, plus an NBA player is giving back to his program in an NIL kind of fashion. We'll discuss that and more as Deals and Deadlines continues. We continue with this episode of Deals and Deadlines with Hadley and Matt. Thanks so much for making us a part of your day, your night, wherever you're enjoying the podcast. Remember, you can also watch on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel. All right, our next guest has got a big role in making sure maybe your favorite athlete is ready for that grueling season or the draft or anything having to do with the sports world. He's Pete Bommarito from Bommarito's Performance Systems. He's kind enough to join us here on Deals and Deadlines. Pete, we appreciate the time. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
We're glad to have you. So talk to me about starting this kind of a business when we know, listen, athletes are always trying to get a leg up on whether it's draft prep or a veteran trying to get another season. How did you come up with this idea, and what was kind of the beginning stages of it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've had this vision in my head from as far back as I can remember. I mean, I'm one of the few lucky people that knew what he wanted to do with his life from a very, very early age, and this is it. So I decided this is what I did in college. I had my exercise science, exercise physiology, all that stuff. I had my backup plans of going to med school and all that in case I failed. And finally, one day I decided just to go for it. And I went and became a college strength coach, did the whole GA thing, got hired on as an assistant, did the internship at the NFL, and then I transferred down to IMG. At the time, it was a sports agency as well. And, you had to sign with that agency in order to train at that IMG facility. And then once I kind of got my experience and all that and got my name up, I moved to South Florida and started my own thing. And it's just been going ever since.
Yeah, and I can tell you, as doing this for 30 plus years, Pete is one of the guys that, whatever sport it is, Pete is great at preparing these guys and getting ready for the season. Obviously, we both just got back from Indianapolis in the Combine, and so let's talk about Combine prep, on how that has become big business. I remember when I first got in the business, guys would just train at their colleges, and then it came to, now some guys were training at facilities like an IMG, and now it is big business. And obviously you are recruiting and competing against other people in your industry. And so talk about how that has grown and developed, and it's become, a big industry with the Combine prep.
Yeah, I think the main thing is people have to understand the timing. The timing is the challenge, and that's always been the challenge of when does the season end versus when does the Combine and Pro Day begin. And then when you throw these all-star games right in the middle of everything, it makes it even more of a challenge. So I think that's what people have to understand is football players their entire lives are used to 6 months. Like you obviously have spring ball and things like that, but in terms of when you're going to peak max strength, max power, max speed, max conditioning, they're used to peaking in July. And you got to take them and have something they've never done before, which is recover from the season quicker and peak in late February or early March or mid-March. That's the challenge. And sometimes when you finally get their body recovered from the season, they go back to Senior Bowl, whatever, and you guys will kind of start all over again. So the challenge is the medical side. And I think, me having the medical background that I do, this is why I think I had so much success very, very early, is that's one component that I believe in and I've always tried to perfect. It's not just how good the training is, it's how fast can we recover the body from the grueling season and from these all-star games, especially now that they, after I started my career, they started doing the college playoff, and then they pushed the national championship game back, and it always proposes more and more challenges of, it seems like the season's longer, the season's more grueling, and the time window becomes shorter. So the key aspect is how many training minutes can you do before a Combine or Pro Day with your body in the aligned state? That is our number one job. Get the body back in alignment just from the wear and tear of football itself. That's outside of injuries. Like some guys are going to come in with injuries they've been playing through, and some guys are going to come in with no injuries, but their body is just beat up from the rigors of actually playing major college football. So I think that's where the business is coming to fruition, is that's what we are providing. We are providing around-the-clock medical care and specified medical disciplines and customized nutrition and things like that. So I think the shift of when everybody started transitioning into these private facilities is we had to offer something that the colleges couldn't provide. It's not like the colleges couldn't do it. It's just the college's medical team is completely centered around the people who are still there.
Right.
So it becomes a challenge for the medical teams in the colleges to provide as much as they need to provide to the guys that are going into the draft, especially when you have these schools that have numerous players going into the draft. So that's kind of where it started, and it's kind of exploded from there. And then the advent of social media allowed us to recruit, and then it's kind of game on from there.
So talk to us about, because what you said I think is interesting, right? It's not just about speed improvement and all those things. It's recovery, and I imagine the science and the data and the biometrics. That's got to be one of the big changes over the last couple of decades, is understanding more about not just the preparation to get better athletically, but understand the science behind it, correct?
Yeah, definitely. And it's so nice seeing all the metrics being done at the All-Star games, the metrics being done at the combines now, the force plate data. The great thing about today's day and age is everything can be quantified. Within a couple of years, biometrics are going to completely take over the NFL. And you're already seeing a lot of trends. Like, it's great that people look at the 40-yard dash, but then you start seeing people that have quantified the velocity of the defensive line at the 10-yard split. That stuff's important. That stuff's just as important as the 40. And these are the things that a lot of the teams are looking at. They're looking at not just the 40, but what are the splits? What's the 5 split? What's the 10 split? What's the 10-20 split? What is the 20-40 split? But what are the velocity metrics at these splits? And I'm so happy that so many services are pushing and publicizing that stuff, because the more the fans understand it, the more the fans are going to want to see it. Hence, this thing is just going to continue to grow and grow.
So, Pete, I was obviously in Indy and had some dinner and whatever with some personnel people one night. And the one thing they commented on this year, and obviously you probably saw it as well, and fans watching it saw it, is times were really fast this year. And, it was an anomaly that there were so many guys running, 4.3s and 4.4s, more than others. What would you attribute that to? Because it was again, multiple personnel people, general managers included, alluded to the fact that this was a very, very fast combine.
I mean, it's interesting. I didn't really see anything different in terms of the speed with compared to other years. I didn't really see any of that much differences. There's always been guys that have the ability and that have run in the 4.2s and 4.3s and 4.4s before. The biggest change I saw is it's becoming more of a standard. Like we had a defensive tackle running the 4.7s, which is extremely challenging. But it's becoming more and more the norm. Before it was like you see that once a decade. Now you're seeing a couple a year. I think the biggest advent we're seeing is those bigger guys are just laying down very, very fast times. And the receivers, running backs, and things like that have always been faster continue being fast. I'd say this year I saw some very fast O linemen, some very lightning fast D linemen. I think they're doing a good job of categorizing them out. Like who is a 249-pound edge rusher versus a 260-pound end versus a 285, 290-pound tackle versus a guy that could play end or tackle. They're starting to do better categories. And we're seeing those bigger guys run fast. And I will say this much, it was definitely a fast running back class, which was great to see. People always talking about the running back class being devalued. It's not really been devalued, it's just changed. They want faster running backs that can play traditional standard running back plus do multiple other things. That's just how the game has changed. And when you're seeing some of these guys run these blazing fast 4.3s and multiple 4s, that's probably the biggest anomaly that I saw.
Pete, we talked about where the business and your business has changed over the last couple of decades. Where do you see it going over the next 10, 15, 20 years? What's next in the evolution of what you do?
I think it's just going to continue to progress. I mean, the greatest thing now is social media is continuing to hit. So now we can publicize who we are and what we do directly to the players. We don't have to go through intermediate sources. Obviously, we're always going to have great relationships with the agents, and the agents believe in our training, and they're going to at least present us as a strong option to get our name in players' ears. But we can also go directly to the source. And social media is not slowing down. It's just getting bigger and better. So I think that's going to be a significant part of it. The other part of it is the great advent of the NIL. The NIL is one of the best things that ever happened to industries like ours, because now we can work out creative deals and get these players in while they're still in college. We have a lot of players that come in on NIL deals in spring break, and where they have that downtime like late May, early June, or over 4th of July break. I mean, even if it's just for a couple of days or a week or whatever, it's easier for us to present who we are and what we do while they're in our facility as opposed to like on a Zoom call or social media. So I think that the recruiting is going to get more fierce. I think that the NIL is really going to continue to push players to be able to come down here and experience systems like mine while they're in college, which is going to help solidify their decision of where they need to go when their college career is over.
Yeah, selling South Florida definitely isn't a problem, Pete, I guess. One other thing that we talk about always on this podcast is the many different hats that someone like me wears as you're representing a player. And sometimes, most of it is business, but there is sometimes where you're a fan. I have to assume that as you're working hard and working on these players' speed and their strength and their mental side and their physical side, when you're watching them run the 40 at the combine, you turn your hat on backwards, and when they run well, because I've gotten calls from you and texts from you when you are jacked up when a guy does really well, you must be overjoyed and become a fan of, hey, our work paid off, but at the same time, you're really happy for the young man, and you get excited like any other fan would get when your clients do well.
I mean, I tell everybody the same thing. Like the NFL Combine and these pro days is like our Super Bowl. It's like our Super Bowl. This is the one time that strength coaches, performance coaches, whatever, can go head-to-head and compete. The competitive juices is just what drives everything in business. And that's what it is. I mean, like, you could be a college strength coach, be the best strength coach in the world, quarterback gets hurt, team has a losing season, everybody's fired. You know what I'm saying? But when you put down these metrics, there is a winner and a loser across the board. And if you have not just one guy ran well, but if you look at the percentage of the guys you train and can they hit above the positional average, that is a win. How many wins and losses does a training system actually have? That's what gets me going. Like when you look at when you're first retiring from sports, what are you going to compete in? And some people choose golf or deer softball leagues. That's never been me. My competition is stuff like this, where the one event where it is quantified, who is the fastest, who is the most powerful, who has this, who has that, who has the metrics across the board at everything. That's what gets me all fired up.
And now he's coaching his kid too, by the way. So that's the juice gets flowing on that. I bet
stays in the family. Listen, Pete, it's a great business, and I know it's going to continue to get bigger and bigger as we go along. We appreciate you spending some time with us, and nothing but good luck to you in the future.
All right, thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it very much. There's Pete Bommarito. Performance Systems is what he and his team has done for a long time and done it very well. Now, he brought up NIL. So I wanted to finish on this note. I saw where Arch Manning, I don't know if you've heard of the name, Arch now going to be the starter at Texas.
I think I've heard.
Yeah, they've done pretty well. He's partnered with Uber, another NIL deal for him to promote a new self-driving taxi service called Waymo. Manning now has about a $6.5 million NIL valuation, which he needs because his family doesn't really come for money. This is just yet another, it's like a portfolio.
It is.
And Arch is quickly going to become maybe the most famous, if the name already isn't put him there, college football player around. Carson Beck, we saw what he got in Miami. Here's another instance in Texas with probably more to come.
Yeah, listen, Arch, obviously is a household name. I think he's the exception, not the rule. Obviously, the Manning name from, I think even in the commercial, his grandfather's in the commercial. So Archie is still involved in his life. So I think that, he's growing the brand continuously. His uncles are obviously household names, and their branding is unbelievable. So they're doing the smart thing. What I admire most about Arch, put the football player aside, he sat on the bench basically for 2 years. You don't find players doing that anymore. And obviously, he's worthy of starting at Texas or anywhere for that matter. And obviously, Texas had to make a decision if Ewers wanted to come back. I think they kind of said, hey, it's time to turn pro or go elsewhere because we're turning the keys over to Arch. And so I think his value is only going to go up. It may be a one-and-done year, so to speak, because if he has a great year, he's draft eligible and he's going to turn pro, which more likely than not, if he does the things he's capable of doing at Texas, he's going to turn pro in 2026. So I think it's great. I think his marketability is, what it needs to be. He's not chasing the dollar's chasing him, and I think his value is only going to go up, but I think it's more the exception than the rule, and, I hope he continues to have success on the field as well.
All right, I will remind you guys, if you are somebody who does subscribe, thank you. If you do not, now's the time to subscribe to the podcast. Click search Deals and Deadlines or just hit subscribe wherever you're listening right now. And this drops each and every Friday and available to you to watch on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel. Thank you to Bella, our executive producer.
Thank you, Bella.
She makes the big bucks. And to you guys for joining us. We'll do it again next week on Deals and Deadlines.